Thank you very much. It will be very difficult for me, and I probably fail, to deliver this talk in half an hour. Since I was about 6, I've been studying the Maya civilization, and I do need to give more background. The organizers told me that. By the way, I really want to thank. This is an amazing event, just incredible. My only complaint is that I believe I have gained about 20 pounds during this conference, but I will try. They asked me also to give some background, because I've found that not only in Asia, but also in Brazil and many other places that I speak, people do not know very much about the Mesoamerican civilization. And I won't be able to cover all of it, but I will go through some of them before I turn to the civilization I work on now, the Maya. And at each point, I'll try to mention some of the controversies that we are studying. Of course, as you know, the populations of the New World came across the Bering Strait from Asia, from Siberia and Mongolia, and according to Dr. Oppenheimer, also from Europe. There's a tremendous controversy. He mentioned that this is a very bitter controversy for some reason about when they came over. Right now, the evidence seems to indicate that there's maybe earlier than we once thought, maybe 50,000 BC, possibly later. And the thing that's interesting about Mesoamerica and the New World civilizations is it's a completely independent tradition that began with hunters and gatherers and evolved. There are incidental contacts, but unlike the civilizations we've been discussing, questions of influence between China and Malaysia, between Rome and India and so on. These are not issues over, it's a totally different civilization. However, it seems that with the population from Asia, tropical forests, some ideas did come over with the shamans, and these appear again, especially with the Maya, many thousands of years later. And one of them that you see is the cosmogram, the importance of sacred geography, the orientation of ceremonial centers to the color, the directions, and in the case of the Maya, colors, and the decisions even where to build sites based on that. And of course, there are also observatories, and this is a very important set of ideas that come over. Also, the idea that the sacred sites are a map of the universe, and that the ceremonial centers indicate the axis of the earth in the middle, which you see with the Khmer, Mount Meru, and you see with the Maya, actually with where their king lived, since the king was divine, as we see in some of the civilizations of Southeast Asia. Also, the importance of ancestor worship. It's something that you really don't see in European civilizations and many others, but in the case of the Maya, they have this, and they have many beliefs and rituals that are similar to Southeast Asia. This is not due to contact, but I think original concepts that came over with the shamans, with the nomads crossing the Bering Strait. One of the things that's most important that you can see comparisons to Southeast Asia is the rulers as divine kings. The ruler is not simply a ruler, he is divine or semi-divine. This is very much like the Devajara cult of the Khmer and other such cults. I've been doing a lot of work recently, I just came from Angkor, comparing these civilizations, and there are a group, I hope to be back here, because there's a group of Maya archaeologists who are comparing them, tropical forest civilizations with the same kind of environment, and also sharing these cosmological concepts, and especially all of the aspects of the divine kingship system, good and bad. Now, to turn to Mesoamerica, I think people often don't even know where it is. It is the area of what is now Mexico and northern Central America. And you see here in the beginning, is there a problem? There's a problem, okay. Let me know if there's something wrong. Wave your hands if there's something wrong. You can't hear me, or I'm incoherent in some way. The highlands and the lowlands, the Maya area and central Mexico, are two distinct traditions. But in the early period, the buffer zone in between, the isthmus between the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico, which is mostly swamps, turns out to be the area of most importance and the origins of the civilization. That is the Isthmian zone, where we first see what you could call Neolithic societies in the swamps. Again, as with Southeast Asia, traditional thinking and theories of anthropologists and archaeologists have emphasized rivers like the Nile, Mesopotamia, areas where you have lakes, but they really don't look at areas like swamps or tropical forests as where civilization should really be developing. Of course, the citizens of Angkor in the Maya area did not hear this rule, and they went ahead and constructed high civilizations in these regions. The first that you get is similar everywhere. Neolithic houses. The Neolithic develops later in the New World because they have somewhat later start. So somewhere between 4,000 and 3,000, and then full sedentism and agriculture at about 1800 to 1000 BC. A very simple culture like this in most areas. But then in one area of the swamp, you start to see between 1300 and 600 BC, the development of the first civilization, the Olmec civilization. And here you see the first earthen temple mounds at these sites, which it's like the environment here, or where I come from. I'm a Cajun from southern Louisiana, that the high areas are very important because most of the region is swamps and water. And you already see the beginning of the centers, the ceremonial centers of the sites, being laid out as cosmograms, as maps of the sacred universe. We used to believe, talking of controversies, that the Olmec civilization was contemporary with the Maya, at 0 AD. We now know from the carbon dating in many studies that they actually were over 1,000 years earlier. And they are well known for their enormous sculptures mostly of these giant heads. We're not sure if these are shamans or rulers or divinities, but in fact, that's all the same in Maya civilization. Those are all one thing. And there is controversy now about the spread of civilization in Mesoamerica. The area you see there with the circle, that's the heartland where the Olmec sites are very large and first developed. And many theorists believe that from there, that civilization developed there and then spread across Mesoamerica. I do not believe that. I've done a lot of work on Olmec archaeology, and I think most people here, that civilization doesn't just develop in one place and move out. It's the result of the kind of interactions that we've all been talking about between developing societies and different regions. So I more or less make fun of the mother culture hypothesis, which I think is a sort of very primitive theoretical perspective. Now, after the Olmec, at about somewhere between 800 and 600 BC, the history of Mesoamerica divides sharply into two stories, and I'll tell the first one about the highlands, and then about the Maya civilization in the lowlands, the one that is similar to the tropical civilizations of Southeast Asia. The highland tradition is a completely different environment, and in fact, the societies there are more like our expectations, not in terms of religious perspectives, but in terms of economy, markets, the same sort of thing that you see in Mesoamerica and Egypt, and I think China. And a lot of this is centered on the central valleys of Mexico, where you have hills that are circumscribed. It's the kind of normal environment for the development of high civilization. As you know, tropical forests, again, are not someplace that people used to consider had early civilization. And the first really large society there is the great city of Teotihuacan, which is an enormous city with gigantic constructions, such as the Pyramid of the Sun. But what's most interesting about it is that it's highly organized. This is just part of it. There's a street system on a grid. There is a great marketplace in the center. Has anyone been to Teotihuacan? It's like the Angkor of the highlands of Mexico. And the key to it all was a market economy, an international kind of market economy, as we've been talking about, and as is sort of normal for a Western civilization. If you go there, you'll see the great buildings, but I should warn you that the Mexican government is not nearly as good as you are here in respecting and presenting the monuments in the right way. So the great central marketplace they're using as the parking lot for visiting the site. It's the most important thing. It is a very nice parking lot, but some of the most recent discoveries, because this civilization was a mercantile one with a great market and not much evidence of divine kingship, it was considered more of a practical civilization, economically driven, and without a great deal of warfare. However, the excavations of my friend, the Japanese team, Saburo Sugiyama, who has made discoveries in the last 5 years, excavating in this other pyramid, the Temple of the Moon, has found that in it there are dedicatory burials that involve lots of treasures, but also sacrificed Maya lords. And in the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, another temple, there are hundreds of warriors buried. And they are buried with all of their jewelry, and their jewelry, a lot of it consists of human skulls, teeth, and mandibles, probably of captured warriors that they would wear. So obviously, we've had a big change. Militarism was very important. But as in the West, and as later with the Aztecs, the militarism was economically driven. They conquered places that were rich so they could get resources and spread out that way and set up an economic system, which is not the kind of warfare that you see in the Maya area. Some, but not initially. After the fall of Teotihuacan, the next civilization is the Toltecs, very much even more militaristic, with cults of human sacrifice and so on. But I can't tell you very much about it because it is very poorly understood and very poorly excavated, I must say. There is this problem in Mexican archaeology that they are very focused on the tourism, so they tend to restore the sites before they've even been properly excavated, so we don't know too much about it. And then the next great civilization that you've probably heard of in the Valley of Mexico was the Aztecs. And the Aztec civilization created, again, huge cities, I mean really huge, probably 1 million people living in the Valley of Mexico. In the case of the Aztecs, their great capital, Tenochtitlan, in addition to having a market, was an island, and it was a created island. Every one of the fields was built up by mud, and it created a very effective, you have water always running through the system, a very effective agricultural production.